This episode is presented by State Farm. Having insurance isn't the same as having State Farm. It's like needing the protection of an offensive guard on the football field, but getting an elementary school crossing guard. Sure, they're both guards, but you can only trust one to keep your quarterback safe when the game is on the line. So don't settle for just any insurance when there's State Farm. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there.
Hello, I'm Diane Morgan. If you know who I am, you know who I am. If you don't, who cares? I'm here to explain Italian Time, a holiday phenomenon where Italians throw away their clocks and gather for eternity with San Pellegrino. I've been at this party so long that I've eaten 5 courses, hugged someone's grandma twice, and been offered a job in the family restaurant. So this holiday season, make sure to bring enough San Pellegrino to last you through the meal, the after meal, and the entire goodbye ritual. San Pellegrino, holiday on Italian Time.
Wake up, well I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. When I go out, yeah I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. If I get drunk, well I know I'm gonna be.
We've got a lot to talk about. So much going on right now. The transfer portal getting ready to open up on Friday, and we're going to cut through hype, separate wishful thinking from reality, identify where Oklahoma actually stands from like why Cam Coleman is likely out of reach for the Sooners to a portal battle that the Sooners can win. Plus, we've got Oklahoma basketball. We've got the Thunder. They're telling us a few things about the way they're playing, their depth, championship habits for the Thunder. So we're going to break it all down. Welcome to the Sooner Nation podcast. Cam Coleman. Biggest name in the portal, but there's a reality check here I think that's going to happen for Oklahoma. There are transfer portal additions, and then there are transfer portal moments. Cam Coleman entering the portal, not just another name hitting the database. It is a seismic event, one that immediately reshapes conversations in coaching office, NIL collectives, and recruiting war rooms across the country. This isn't about depth. This isn't about rotation. This isn't about nice value if it works out. This is about one of the most physically gifted wide receivers in all of college football becoming available at the exact moment Oklahoma is still defining what it wants to look like offensively within the SEC. And here's the uncomfortable truth that has to be acknowledged right up front of this conversation. Oklahoma's chances of actually landing Cam Coleman are slim. Not impossible, not non-existent, but slim. And understanding why they're slim tells you far more about where Oklahoma actually stands in the modern college football ecosystem than whether this recruitment ends up with a commitment graphic put out on Twitter. So let's start by looking at Cam Coleman, because this is not a guy who's hype-driven. He is production-driven. Across his time at Auburn, Coleman put together 93 receptions, 1,306 yards, 13 touchdowns. He did that in an offense that never truly stabilized at quarterback and often struggled to create space consistently. 2025 alone with Jackson Arnold, and then everything that followed that circus. He totaled 708 yards, 5 touchdowns, despite being the focal point of opposing defensive game plans nearly every week. Those aren't numbers. They don't really fully capture his impact. At 6'3", roughly 200 pounds, Coleman looks like he was designed in a lab for SEC boundary football. He plays through contact. He wins at the point of catch. He threatens vertically without being a one-dimensional speed receiver. And most importantly, his skill set translates cleanly into Sundays, which is that's the currency that actually matters in recruitments like this. So Coleman's not just productive, he's portable. And that's what makes him dangerous on the open market. But now let's talk about Oklahoma's interest, because it's logical. The Sooners should be interested. Any serious program has to be interested. And Oklahoma's offense, they flashed explosiveness, but it's lacked one consistent, imposing presence on the outside who forces defenses to declare coverage before the ball is snapped. A true alpha, like a gravity player. Cam Coleman is that guy. In Norman, Coleman wouldn't be a complementary piece to this offense. He wouldn't be one option amongst many. He would be the piece. The receiver defenses tilt towards, the player who opens space for everyone else without needing manufactured touches. From a pure football standpoint, Oklahoma makes sense. But then reality steps into the room. Because portal battles, they're not won on football sense alone. They're won on leverage, alignment, and resources. So this recruitment, it's shaping up to be an arms race. It's one that Oklahoma is entering slightly behind the front line. Because, look, you start with Texas A&M. You can't avoid them in this conversation. Coleman was once committed to the Aggies. Those relationships matter more than what we want to admit as Sooner Nation. Recruiting isn't transactional, it's relational. We talk about that with Oklahoma and all the inroads that Brent Venables and his staff makes. And Texas A&M has money. So they have need, they have money, they have familiarity, and they can sell Coleman on immediate starring status without adjustment or uncertainty. That's a dangerous combination. Then there's Alabama, right? The in-state gravity, well, that never fully releases elite talent. The Tide don't always chase like top of the market NIL deals, but they don't need to. Their pitch is infrastructure, development, and credibility. Coleman, he may not be guaranteed volume there, but Alabama doesn't sell guarantees. They sell outcomes. And the Tide typically deliver. Georgia enters the picture here, probably as the most complete program in the sport. They don't always feature wide receivers statistically, but they win. And for players confident in their own ability, Georgia's pitch is simple. Survive here, and the league's going to find you. I think LSU might be a clean fit here. I mean, if Cam Coleman's priority is maximizing NFL draft stock, LSU doesn't have to promise anything. They show tape. Like Jefferson, Chase, Neighbors. Proof beats projection. And then there's national brands hovering outside of the SEC that are going to have their say in this. Ohio State, I think they've got a huge shot here. They've built the modern gold standard at receiver. If there's a clear path to volume, that history becomes incredibly persuasive. USC offers something different: visibility, branding, offensive centrality, and a major market. So for a player aware of life beyond football, there's a pitch that's going to matter. So where does all this leave Oklahoma? I think the Sooners somewhere in the middle, and that's the hard part in this. Oklahoma's pitch can't rely on nostalgia. The days of remember what we used to be at receiver, those days are gone. They don't move the needle in portal recruitments like this. The Sooners have to sell precision and planning and development and opportunity, not history. Now, they can offer opportunity. They can offer real opportunity. They can offer role clarity. They can offer immediate and sustained role clarity. They can offer SEC competition without rotational politics. What they can't always offer, at least not consistently, is top of the market NIL power on demand. Now, slow down. That doesn't mean Oklahoma's broke. It means that they're disciplined. And discipline is admirable, but it's not always rewarded in an open market. This recruitment will come down to alignment, not just money, but structure. Not just playing time, but vision. Not just football, but trust. Oklahoma has to move quickly. Portal windows don't wait for perfect pitches. Momentum matters. Silence kills. Hesitation loses. But even if Oklahoma executes this perfectly, even if they make the right offer, sell the right role, and push all of the right buttons, they're still competing uphill against programs that live at the top of this food chain every single cycle. And that's the part that fans don't always want to hear. And here's the broader question this recruitment forces Oklahoma to confront. What does it mean if the Sooners land Cam Coleman? And what does it mean if they don't? Because if Oklahoma lands him, it sends a message, and both internally and nationally, that the Sooners are no longer adapting to SEC economics. They're competing in them. It says elite transfers see Norman as a place to thrive, not to rehabilitate. Those are things that matter for future portal cycles. It matters for high school recruiting. It matters for belief inside that locker room. But if Oklahoma misses here, we're not talking about failure, but it's a reminder that this league is unforgiving, that the margin is thin, and that portal success requires constant recalibration. And the truth is this: Oklahoma doesn't need Cam Coleman to survive. But landing him would accelerate everything that they're trying to become. That's why this pursuit matters beyond headlines. It matters beyond message boards, beyond commitment graphics. Cam Coleman he's not just choosing a school. He's choosing a platform, a direction, a statement. And for Oklahoma, this recruitment is less about the final answer, more about whether they're truly prepared to win battles that define the next era of college football. Because here in the portal era, stars don't wait, and neither can Oklahoma.
Here's my 30-second story with Guinness. As soon as my sister and I get home for the holidays, we don't even unpack. We head straight to our pub. The bartender already knows our order, Guinness and fries. We laugh all night, catch up with old friends, and walk home with faces sore from smiling. It's one of my favorite nights of the year. That was my 30-second story with Guinness.
Guinness Draft Stout. Please enjoy responsibly. Imported by Diageo Beer Company, USA, New York, New York.
So what we're going to do is steer away for just a little while, portal talk and talk hoops. If you're here only for transfer portal stuff, I've got some really good thoughts on the very last segment for the transfer portal for Oklahoma. You can skip forward the next two segments, roughly 18 to 20 minutes, and then let's talk running back and the transfer portal. But if you're here for the hoops, let's talk about it, because Oklahoma wrapped up non-conference play with another blowout. And blowouts, there's at their root, blowouts are supposed to be forgettable. Those are the games that you glance at the box score, you note the margin, maybe you check who led in scoring, and then you immediately move on. Especially in late December, especially against a one-win opponent, especially when conference play is looming and patience is thin. And that's exactly why Oklahoma's 93-69 win over Mississippi Valley State deserves a little bit more attention than what it's getting. Because this wasn't a game about dominance. It wasn't a game about flexing, and it definitely wasn't about humiliation. It was about something far more revealing as conference play approaches on Saturday. It was about whether Oklahoma can sustain its identity when things don't go exactly to plan. And on Monday night, quietly but convincingly, the Sooners answered that question. Because, you look as a coach, there's a game script that you want. And this game, it didn't follow the script. But what I want to talk about is that's the point. The uncomfortable truth here is that this wasn't the cruise control blowout that many people, like myself, expected after watching them dismantle Stetson last week. Mississippi Valley State, they didn't fold early. They competed. They stayed connected longer than expected. They forced Oklahoma to execute instead of simply being overwhelmed. And for stretches there in the first half, this was a game that required attention. And those are things that matters, because the danger in games like this isn't losing. It's really learning nothing from it. Oklahoma could have sleptwalked through this. They could have leaned on their talent and still won by 20. Instead, they encountered resistance. Rhythm stalled, that the pace flattened, and the Sooners had to solve problems rather than wait for separation to arrive naturally. Those moments are where teams reveal who they really are. And what Oklahoma revealed was depth, not theoretical depth, but functional, trusted depth. You look at a guy like Cole Attack. He didn't just score. He changed the shape of this game. Every game has a hinge point. Against Mississippi Valley State, it wasn't a timeout. It wasn't a defensive tweak. It wasn't a lineup shuffle. It was an attack. He didn't enter this night as the headliner, but he left as it's the defining figure of the game. Career high 24 points, 6 made 3-point shots, 19 points in the first half alone. But here's the key. This wasn't empty production. This wasn't end of the bench scoring with the outcome already decided. Attack's burst came when Oklahoma needed control of the game. When the offense briefly stalled, he became the release valve. And when Valley lingered within striking distance, he stretched the floor. When Oklahoma needed separation, not celebration, he delivered that. And again, those are things, those are distinctions that you look at when you're finding out what matters and what doesn't matter. There's a difference between a bench player and a bench weapon. And on Monday night, Attack crossed that line. And for a team about to start conference play, that is a enormous thing. I think I tried to say huge and enormous. So you huge, enormous. That's big for the Sooners. How's that? And I think this game matters more than the final score, because the Sooners, unlike Stetson a week ago, they didn't shoot at a historic clip on Monday night. The defense wasn't pristine. Mississippi Valley State finished with 69 points. That's a number that might have raised eyebrows a week ago, certainly more than I predicted in the score. But that's exactly why this game deserves context, because good teams win when everything goes right. Better teams win when things don't go right. The Sooners didn't need Xavier Brown to dominate every possession, but he still gave them 22 points and 5 assists, had his usual poise. They didn't need Mohamed Wagib to own the paint for 30 straight minutes. His presence still anchored the interior defensively, but again, foul trouble. Instead, the Sooners leaned into their rotation. Different lineups absorbed minutes. Different combinations held leads. And most importantly, Oklahoma didn't panic when the game demanded something other than their typical fireworks. And I say this a lot. That's not accidental. That is structure. And you look at the way Porter Moser handled this. He coached this game more like a rehearsal, not a rescue. Right? One of the lingering critiques that we've had in recent seasons has been fragility. Not effort, but just margin. And when starters played well, the Sooners were competitive. But when they didn't play well, the floor dropped quickly. And I think Moser finally has enough bodies that you're starting to see that change. So against Mississippi Valley State, he didn't coach like someone who was protecting a lead. He coached like someone who was testing a system. So the minutes flowed, the lineups shifted, mistakes weren't immediately punished with substitutions. They were corrected through repetition. And I think that's confidence from the sideline. Moser didn't coach this game like he feared it. He coached it like he knew exactly what he needed, both from the game and from his team. And what he needed wasn't just a win. It was confirmation that the rotation can stretch without snapping. Depth is not about numbers. It's about trust. And this is where Oklahoma's growth becomes real. Depth isn't about how many players you list on your roster. It's about who you're willing to trust on that roster when the game hasn't fully tilted your way. Oklahoma played multiple bench contributors, meaningful minutes, not as a courtesy, but as a necessity. And when they did, the lead didn't evaporate. The pace didn't crater. Defensive principles didn't dissolve into chaos. And that's the takeaway here. Sure, Attack's breakout, it's going to grab headlines, but the cumulative effect here is what matters. Oklahoma went deeper into the bench and didn't bleed points. That's how coaches sleep at night in February, because the SEC doesn't test your best 5, it tests your 8th and 9th best players. So this was an SEC-style trust test in disguise. Mississippi Valley State, yeah, they're not going to resemble Ole Miss coming on Saturday. They're not going to resemble Auburn, Tennessee in talent, but the structure of the game will feel familiar. Uneven rhythm, unexpected resistance, stretches of sloppiness, nights where momentum doesn't arrive on schedule. And Oklahoma responded to all that with patience. They didn't chase highlights. They didn't force tempo. They didn't abandon their plan when Valley lingered longer than they were supposed to. They let the game settle. That's maturity, and that's something that this program, it hasn't always shown. So let's zoom out. Let's talk about where Oklahoma actually stands right now on the cusp of conference play. They're going to exit non-conference portion of their schedule at 10-3. But, records kind of lie in December. What matters is how teams arrive at January. And now the Sooners, they're going to arrive with a clear offensive hierarchy, guards who value possessions, a front court that can rotate without panic, and now it looks like you've got a bench player who's proven that he can swing a game. Now, none of that guarantees wins in the SEC. Nothing really does. But it does guarantee Oklahoma won't enter league play hoping that things are going to break right. They'll enter conference play expecting to compete every night, regardless of the circumstance. And I think that's a meaningful shift in this program. This wasn't about Mississippi Valley State. That's the kind of the final point that's worth making here. This game wasn't a referendum on Valley. It was a self-assessment for Oklahoma. And the answer came back encouraging. The Sooners didn't just beat an overmatched opponent. They showed adaptability. They showed restraint. They showed that when the margin tightens early, there's another gear available. And it doesn't require draining the starters or scraping the plan. Those are the traits of a team that understands itself. The standard is being set. Stetson showed that Oklahoma has a really high ceiling. Mississippi Valley State showed that there's a floor here to work with. And maybe that's even more important, because the difference between good teams and dangerous teams, it's not how high they can climb. It's really how rarely they fall. And on Monday night, Oklahoma didn't fall. It adjusted. It trusted its depth and moved forward without drama. That's not going to be headline basketball, but it is winning basketball. And as you move into conference play, well, that might be the most important development of all for this team. Hey, make sure you're following us online, Heartland Sports on Facebook, Heartland Sports on Instagram, heartland-sports.com on the website. If you're wherever you're picking up Sooner Nation podcasts, first of all, thank you. And then make sure you give us a subscribe, give us a like, give us a good rating, tell your friend about us, and we'll be right back.
Game's over. Time to check my fantasy scores.
You using a VPN?
Why?
Because using public Wi-Fi without a VPN is like leaving your wallet open on the table.
Oh. Time to up my defense.
McAfee Secure VPN keeps your personal information private and is included in all McAfee plans starting at just $39.99 for your first year. Sign up at McAfee.com/online protection.
So the Oklahoma Sooners, they weren't the only basketball team to kind of have a weird game on Monday night. You look at what the Thunder did against Atlanta, there you have another one. I mean, there are NBA games that entertain you, and then there are moments inside those games that explain everything you need to know. Oklahoma City's 140-129 win over the Atlanta Hawks. It was loud, it was fast, it was filled with shot-making, star power, and obviously enough scoring to satisfy anyone scanning highlights in the next morning. I picked the under, so I wasn't satisfied. But none of that's the point. That's not what we're talking about here. The point is the point in this game with Oklahoma City, it lives in the 12 minutes after halftime. The 12 minutes set, I think, reminded the NBA why the Thunder still set the standard for what real control looks like within this league. Because ultimately, games themselves, they don't crown champions. The individual quarters of those games, that's where championships are formed. And I think this game was lying to us at halftime. It really was. Because for 2 quarters, Atlanta made Oklahoma City look uncomfortable. The Hawks did exactly what undermanned teams are supposed to do when talent gaps exist. They spread the floor, they shot early, they shot often. They dared Oklahoma City to chase pace instead of imposing their own structure. And for a while, it worked. At halftime, the Thunder trailed 74-70, and Atlanta had rhythm. The arena, the energy was kind of weird, and the game felt closer than the rosters suggested that it would. That moment right there, that's where the separation between good teams and champions begins. Not in avoiding resistance, but in how a team responds when the game asks a real question. Oklahoma City didn't answer immediately with a run. They answered with intent. I mean, the third quarter, it was more of a declaration. The 30-11 stretch in favor of Oklahoma City that opened up that third quarter, it wasn't fueled by hot shooting or whistle luck. It wasn't a random burst of momentum. It was structure reasserting itself back into this game. Atlanta wanted to win from the outside. Oklahoma City wanted to win from everywhere else. And that difference philosophically is why the Thunder didn't just take control of the game. They removed Atlanta's options. This wasn't about shot making. It wasn't about decision making. It was about Oklahoma City doing what they do. And I mean, look, SGA, he solved the Hawks. He finished with 39 points. I mean, that's what the box score is going to tell you. But that's not the story here. The story is how he scored those points. He didn't chase threes to match the volume that Atlanta was jacking up. He didn't rush possessions to keep pace with the Hawks. He just hunted space. He hunted mismatches. He hunted defenders who didn't want to defend vertically for 48 minutes. Every time Atlanta stretched Oklahoma City's defense outward, Shea went straight through the middle. That's not scoring. That's quarterbacking. That in the third quarter, SGA dictated where help had to come from. He forced rotations. He collapsed lanes, and every adjustment the Hawks made to stop him, it opened up something else: a cut, a drop off, a weak side collapse that never fully recovered. And that's what they do. Champions, they don't just score; they make defenses choose poorly, make wrong choices. And control isn't about shooting, it's about pressure. This is when Oklahoma City separates itself from the rest of this league. Too many teams mistake shot making for control. They believe that if the shots are falling, they're dictating the terms, but the Thunder understands something deeper. Control is about pressure. The kind that builds quietly, the kind that forces defenders to think it half a second longer than they want to. The kind that turns spacing into stress. And in that quarter, Oklahoma City, they didn't outshoot Atlanta. They out-decided the Hawks. Every Atlanta three came with attacks. A body in the lane, a rebound that was contested, a sprint back on defense, or a physical reminder that the next possession, it's not going to be easy. And pressure compounds. A team worried about rim protection doesn't close out as hard. A team the teams whose defense is collapsing inward, it doesn't communicate cleanly. And a roster missing stars, they don't have a second answer when the first one stops working. And the Thunder exploited all of that. And once again, it was Chet Holmgren. I mean, there's an impact here that goes beyond the numbers. He finished with 24 points and 3 blocked shots, and that's what, again, the stat sheet's going to show you, but his third quarter impact was far more subtle and far more important. Not a guy chasing contact, not a guy who's overextending, not a guy who's gambling for highlights. What he did was he just occupied space, vertical space, horizontal space, psychological space. Atlanta had to think twice before they attacked the rim. People driving hesitate. Floaters kind of drift off. Kickouts, they came a little bit too late. That hesitation is everything. So Chet didn't necessarily dominate possessions, but he dominated decisions. And for a player, let me look at him, honestly, still early in his NBA life, that is grown man basketball. Another guy we called out going into this game was Jalen Williams. I mean, this dude was a quiet stabilizer. And every great team has a player who just kind of connects everything together. And for Oklahoma City, that player, I think, is Jalen Williams. His third quarter impact wasn't explosive. It didn't scream, hey, everybody look at me. But it stabilized everything. He secured rebounds when possessions needed to end. He drew secondary defenders without forcing shots. He punished passing lanes without gambling. When the game threatened to drift toward chaos, Williams kept Oklahoma City operating on rails. That's your depth. That's your championship depth. No highlight explosions. Trust, although he did have a nice dunk. But I'm talking about trust when the moment tightens. Everyone knows where to stand, when to cut, how to punish mistakes without forcing the issue. And guys like Jalen Williams, they run that. And for the second game in a row, we saw a huge advantage in the paint. And it was philosophical. It's not accidental. The Thunder finished with a 70-36 advantage in terms of paint points. So, I mean, that's a statement. Not an accident, a statement. Against a team that launched 54 three-point shots, Oklahoma City refused to engage in a shooting contest. They treated every Hawks jumper as an invitation to respond with something more demoralizing, a layup, a dunk, a free throw, or a stop that turned into transition pressure. It wasn't flashy, but what it was suffocating. And that's how you break teams who rely on rhythm more than their depth. And you know, yeah, Atlanta makes a late push, but it doesn't really matter. Because the Hawks cut it to 129, 125 late in this game. On paper, yeah, that looks like tension, but the reality is this game was already over. Because Oklahoma City wasn't searching for answers anymore. They had already found what they needed in the third quarter. And that's the difference between teams hoping to survive and teams that know exactly where to go when that margin begins to tighten. So the Thunder didn't panic because they'd already proven something to themselves earlier in the night. They knew where the leverage lived. Now, I panicked because I had the Thunder covering and I had the under. So yeah, I panicked, but the Thunder didn't. They went back and back and back to what they were. And I think this win to me is about identity maintenance. So it's not record padding. It's not offensive fireworks. I think it's about reminding the league and themselves and us who they really are. I mean, Oklahoma City is still young. Yeah, they're the defending champs, but by NBA standards, they're still a very young team. But they no longer play young when the game turns uncomfortable. That third quarter against Atlanta was a reminder that this team doesn't need perfection. They don't need perfect conditions. They don't need your help to dominate. They just need clarity. And clarity for this Thunder team right now, it lives inside the arc. So the league needs to be paying attention to this. And here's the reason why. Because the NBA is going to continue to chase spacing, pace, and shooting. And Oklahoma City certainly has those tools as well. But what separates them is their willingness to counter trends instead of obeying them blindly. When opponents go small, the Thunder go strong. When teams spread the floor, Oklahoma City collapses it. When the moment demands patience, they slow just enough to make defenders uncomfortable. That's championship muscle memory forming in real time. And the third quarter, it tells us a truth. Atlanta, it gave Oklahoma City a test, not of talent, but of style. And the Thunder, they didn't just pass it, they turned it into a lesson. So yeah, that third quarter wasn't loud. And again, not screaming to be written about and spoken about, and probably not as much as I have even. But what it did was that third quarter told the truth. And the truth is this. The Thunder, they don't just win games anymore. They decide how the games are allowed to be played. That's the mark of a team that knows exactly who it is and exactly when to remind the rest of the league. And that's why those 12 minutes after halftime, yeah, Oklahoma City once again showed why the standard still runs through the Paycom Center.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? But with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers, a network of 130 million of them, in fact. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills, and did I say job title? See how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. Spend $250 on your first campaign and get a free $250 credit for the next one. Get started at linkedin.com/campaign. Terms and conditions apply.
Well, let's close out this episode by talking about a portal battle that Oklahoma actually can win. And I think Caleb Hawkins, I think this is a different situation than anything else we've talked about. Up until this point, our transfer portal conversations, they've carried a kind of a familiar tone. Big names, big production, big speculation, and if we're being honest, slim odds. I mean, we opened this podcast talking about Cam Coleman, and I'm going to say it again here at the end. I don't think Cam Coleman is coming to Oklahoma. Now, that doesn't make the conversation pointless, but it does make it theoretical. Those discussions are about aspiration, about where Oklahoma wants to be in the portal ecosystem, not necessarily where the Sooners are right now. This conversation, though, this one's different. This is the first portal player we've talked about this cycle where I genuinely believe Oklahoma has a real tangible chance to land him. And he's not a prayer. He's not a long shot, not a maybe if everything breaks right. This is a legitimate shot, in my opinion. And that, we're talking about North Texas running back Caleb Hawkins, which maybe you know about him, maybe you don't. But listen, this is an immediate thing that matters for this team. The transfer portal hasn't officially opened yet, obviously, but make no mistake, this recruitment, it's already underway behind the scenes. And when the window does open on Friday, Hawkins is instantly going to become one of the most sought-after offensive players in the entire portal. And from everything being whispered around the region, Oklahoma isn't just monitoring this situation. The Sooners are very much involved. This is not smoke without fire. Hawkins checks almost every box Oklahoma has quietly prioritized since entering this conference. And that's why his name keeps surfacing in Norman circles. So let me start with the facts here. I mean, before rumors, before speculation, before fit, let's talk production. Because he wasn't just good in 2025. Caleb Hawkins was historically productive. As a true freshman at North Texas, he finished with 1,804 total yards from scrimmage, 1,400 plus rushing yards, 29 total touchdowns, an FBS freshman record, a steady 20 carries per game. That's huge. 20 totes per game, and virtually no durability concerns, despite being the focal point of the offense. That's not the type of production that happens by accident. North Texas built its entire offense around Hawkins as a true freshman. Defenses stacked the box. Game plans were designed to stop him first, and he still punished them week after week. Multiple personnel evaluations have privately described Hawkins as, quote, SEC ready. And not because he's a track athlete, but because of how he runs. So you got to look at the type of running back he is. He's unlike anything Oklahoma has had since the SEC, the last 2 years is joining, I guess. And I think this is where he separates himself from the average portal running back. He's not a gadget guy. He's not a space-only option. He's not a one-cut sprinter who disappears when lanes close up. Hawkins is a true bell cow running back, roughly 210 pounds, with a powerful lower half. He thrives between the tackles. His best traits jump off immediately when you look at the film. Elite contact balance, advanced vision for his age, natural feel for cutback lanes, strong finishing ability at the second level. He runs with economy, no wasted movement, no dancing. He makes the correct read and he gets north-south. Coaches love that. Football fans love that. And more importantly, that's a style that translates upwards. This isn't a player whose production needs, quote, context or translation. Evaluators see him as a clean projection, the same runner, just against better competition. That is rare in the portal, but that's why Hawkins is going to demand a lot of attention. And that's why the Sooners are one of those teams. And again, uncomfortable truths for Oklahoma fans. We know this. The 2025 rushing attack, it lacked identity. There were backs There were flashes, there were moments, but there was no closer in this group. There was no one who could salt away games in the fourth quarter, keep the offense on schedule, protect the quarterback late in tight games. Internally, the staff knows this. Externally, Sooner Nation, we know this. And we all know that the SEC punishes indecision in the run game. You don't survive November without someone that defenses have to account for on first and second down. Caleb Hawkins solves multiple problems at once. And there's also a schematic fit at Oklahoma. And in this offense, Hawkins wouldn't be a luxury. He would be foundational. Think about what I said about Cam Coleman and apply it right here. He immediately becomes the early down anchor, the stabilizer for play action, the tone setter on hostile road games. He's the running back that coaches trust when the margin gets thin. Volume matters in this conference, but reliability matters even more. And Hawkins doesn't bust assignments. He hits the correct gap. He falls forward. And quietly, evaluators like his passing game ability as well, more than maybe the public stats suggest. Screens, swing passes, check downs. He keeps linebackers honest, and that's something that matters when defenses are daring you to be patient. So the recruiting logic here is this. I mean, it makes sense. And OU makes sense for him also. I mean, there's a regional layer to this recruitment. Hawkins, he's from Shawnee, Oklahoma. Now, that doesn't guarantee anything, but it does matter. And sources close to him have said that with this recruitment, geography, it's not irrelevant. Now, obviously, NIL is going to play a role. I mean, duh. But comfort, exposure, opportunity, they all matter as well. And Oklahoma can sell immediate SEC relevance, national exposure every week, a clear NFL evaluation path, and most importantly, a featured role. That's important because this isn't a guy who's leaving North Texas to split carries somewhere else, right? He left North Texas to level up. Now, obviously, there's competition here for the Sooners. This isn't an Oklahoma-only race. And from what I understand, what I've been told, what I see, there's two primary rivals involved here. And both of these guys, well, they're teams that Oklahoma doesn't like. You got Oklahoma State. There's a wild card here because they hired Eric Morris. That's the former coach for Hawkins at North Texas, along with running backs coach Patrick Cobbs. So you got familiarity, you got trust, you got continuity, you got proximity. That's a real pitch for the Cowboys. You got the Texas Longhorns. There's a heavyweight pitch. They're facing significant attrition at running back themselves, and opportunity is going to exist immediately. Their NIL infrastructure, well, pretty elite, and the NFL pipeline, it kind of sells itself. So that pitch, it's simple. Resources, volume, visibility. So you have to ask, where does Oklahoma fit in all this? Well, I think Oklahoma's pitch is a little bit different. Because Oklahoma's not selling comfort. They're not selling flash. They're not selling, social media food. I'm trying to think of a word here. What Oklahoma's selling is upward trajectory. They're selling the chance to be the tone setter in an SEC offense trying to reclaim physical identity. Hawkins wouldn't just be a piece. He would be a statement. And that's something that should matter to a back who carried an entire program as a freshman. And let me tell you why I think this feels different. Because, portal recruitments are typically loud. This one has not been. That's often a sign that groundwork has already been laid, that staffs are waiting for the window to open, that decisions could come quickly once visits begin. And multiple sources believe Hawkins won't drag this process out. Once the portal opens, I think this is going to move fast. Now, here's the insider read here. Here's the honest assessment from people close to this situation. If Oklahoma prioritizes him, if they truly prioritize him, Caleb Hawkins and the Sooners are going to be in communication, and Oklahoma will be in this race until the very end. They both know he fits what Oklahoma needs. He fits how Oklahoma wants to play. He fits where they're trying to go in the SEC. So this isn't about splash for either side. It's about stability. And Hawkins is not going to be a luxury add. He's a foundational one. And if Oklahoma does land him, it won't just be an upgrade in the running back room. It's going to be a signal shift towards the kind of physical, controlled football that actually wins games in December. So the portal opens Friday. And this is one recruitment I think Oklahoma can't afford to treat just like a rumor, because this one feels real. And that's the difference between chasing headlines and building something real. Oklahoma doesn't need every portal star. The Sooners need the right ones. And if they stay disciplined, if they trust their identity and win the battles that actually matter, I think the results are going to follow. So there it is. So obviously, we'll be back to break it all down. And hey, this is the last podcast episode of the year. So let me tell you, Happy New Year. And we'll be back later on in the week, the first of the year. And maybe we'll have some news then. Until then, enjoy your holiday. Enjoy your New Year. Stay safe. And we'll see you.